Welcome back. It is a video about databases. Um, the target audience for this video is going to not be senior backend developers. Um, if you already know like how to manage schemas within databases between check-ins, if you even know what the word ORM means or stands for, if you had experience in um, you know really working with databases on a day-to-day purpose. um, Long story short, you're welcome to stick around. You're welcome to see what my recommendations and some things are as it pertains to the servers we're going to choose and some of the libraries we're going to choose. Um, this is going to be a very quick video, but this is not for you. This is for, let's say, the JavaScript developer or the Power On developer or the non developer that might get stuck because of limited resourcing or time doing some amount of database work. And plus some recommendations of what to do or libraries to use within the Microsoft stack. So, as we know, we this is part of our rapid application architecture for hackathons, and there are really three pillars that we need to worry about. We need to understand what database, what kind of database or product we're going to use, how we're going to manage the schema. That is, as we build the software step by step, how are we going to manage the database tables and columns that are created such that if multiple people are working in it, it can all fit together. But that's also important for the maturity of the software of a product and how we install things. And then the last is ORM, or object relational mapping, which is how do we effectively get or put the data in the database in a way that makes sense when we're using .NET and C Sharp. Okay, so a couple of very quick recommendations. Number one, as it pertains to the database, we're going to use SQL Express and SQL Management Studio to interface with that particular server. That is a real big recommendation. Now, if there's still senior engineers listening to this, like, people that, may not have any skin in the game, they'll be like, okay, sounds great. But for those more senior engineers, they might be like, I have an affinity to use Oracle or Cassandra, or I have a NoSQL need, or I'm doing event sourcing. So I need an event source DB. And if you have a technical reason, you are probably very knowledgeable about why you're making that particular decision. I just want you to be just slightly sensitive to the fact that, again, there's probably nothing in the rubric that says this is impractical technology choice. But just remember that if you are hoping that your product is adopted by credit unions and actually used, you can't use this depends upon a $1 million Oracle professional license to run, and or any really sideways database product that's going to take a lot to support that nobody knows how to set up or support. So pretty much every FI I've ever met, they at minimum can afford free SQL Express, and also they at minimum most likely also have a SQL cluster installed on prem. So that's the choice we're going to use. To download that particular product, I'll just show you here. You just go to download Microsoft. You can just Google SQL Express. That's just going to download and install the server. And then you will need to interface with that server using SQL Management Studio. Again, if you're a senior engineer and you're like, I interface it, through Visual Studio or VS Code, cool, man. Like, you do you. I am talking to the person that is totally new to this. Okay. So then the next thing that we need to do is, as we're building out, I'm going to at least assume that even if you are a non-developer, um, I'm going to assume that at least at this point that you go and find other resources of how to build tables or how to build, what tables are and what columns are. But I'm going to assume that like a JavaScript developer or even a power on developer who's working with, the record, based system that is Scimitar, um, has some familiarity of like what querying is and what joining information is and things of that nature. And so it's with that um, premise, or with that assumption, let me say, that we're going to use some very simplistic tools that really lean into that simplistic model. There are a lot of ORMs or a lot of products that are far more production ready, far more richer, but we're not going to worry about that. Our time is super limited. And for some reason or another, you're in a resource pinch. You don't have that senior engineer that's like, I use EF Core and I know how to use that really well, or in Hibernate, or those types of tools. So I'm going to give you some practical tools that'll get you moving. So the other thing that we want to make sure that we keep up to date is our schema management. So what is schema management? What does that mean? What that means is that we need to build tables and columns. We need to, administer our database in a way that can be documented and upkept as part of an installable software package. And also, this helps with team management too, if you have multiple people working on the database at once. So for that, may I recommend the open source solution, Fluent Migrations. There are a lot of really similar things. EF Core has a similar functionality. There's Liquibase. But for me, and this is what, again, we use for our production systems for permission assist, is Fluent Migrations. And the model is really, really simple. And that is that you, in code, you create a migration, you add a migration number. And if you notice, it kind of looks like a date time. That's because if the latest migration was 4 and you have 2 people working at once, and they go, well, the next logical is 5. Well, guess what? You're going to have 2 5s, and one's going to lose and one's going to win. But if you use date and times, the possibility of a conflict is very, very low. But then you write in both an up and a down. Pro tip: you're limited for time. And how often do people really roll out data? You don't have to write it down. Just leave it empty. You create an up with a language. This is called a fluent interface, hence Fluent Migration being the name of the library, and allows you to create tables, drop columns, build indexes using a fluent interface like this. And then if you were to go over here, where was it? Quick start. You can see not only what you need to add, but then also an example. And then also you would probably put this type of code that is like, migrate the database, within your Windows service or the startup of your web application. We haven't talked about those pieces, or maybe you're watching this out of order. But long story short, you would need a way to keep the database up to date with the different changes all the time. So this is a great tool for you to do. And if you need any hands-on help setting it up or learning how to use it, the event is a place to learn new things. So by all means, give me a shout. The second is an ORM. An ORM stands for Object Relational Mapping. That is, you have in your C# code, and let's go down to an example here. You have an object called a dog. Well, you have, I would think, then maybe a database table called dogs, and it would have columns that are mapped just like your properties here on your C# object. Well, what it allows you to do without writing a lot of long, laborious code is it allows you to do that, like select star from dogs and then bind it. It's called binding, where it's taking the data from the database and creating instances of that dog object that are hydrated with your data in it. It's super lightweight. It's not meant to be heavy at all. It's not meant for you to understand a bunch of conventions that you have to play by. It's super flexible in that way. So why do I recommend Dapr over in Hibernate or EF Core? Well, first off, again, if you have a guru in those technologies that know how to hit the ground running, use those. They're great tools. But what I found when working with different teams on different hackathons is that people's experiences, especially people that are at hackathons, they have some experience in querying. Again, on demand or power on people know how to query data. Even non-developers, they're like, oh yeah, I used to do crystal reports and I know what querying data is, or I know how to cobble together this language. And it's one of those things that can really help then again the back end developer, or perhaps even a front end developer that's having to play back end developer for the weekend, to kind of offshoot and say, okay, you get me that information. I can mock up the data for now, and you go work on that complex query within SQL and get it back to me, and we can plug it in and then use Dapper as the middle shim, and we'll meet in the middle. So I really think that Dapper is a great tool for teams that need to diversify some of the C# responsibility. Another great resource, just because I think that the GitHub pages are a little weak. Learn Dapper ORM is a great resource, but again, there's tons of YouTube videos out there of how to use Dapper. It's definitely something that is very well documented and very well, you know, researched or talked about on YouTube and things of that nature. So that's kind of what I have to say about databases. See you in the next video.